Good morning, everyone. We want to keep these training sessions to a very strict time frame and respect everyone's time, so let's get started. I'm Rod Matheson. I'm serving as moderator today for this presentation on SYSPRO security and auditing options, being presented by Stefano Orsini. First, thank you for registering and joining what is our 5th session now. I remind you that our training series will entail an English presentation on Thursday of each week, and a corresponding French presentation of the same topic on the following Tuesday of each week. Both will always take place at 11 a.m. The sessions have been going well, but we are open and look forward to any feedback you may have to make it better. From a housekeeping point of view, we again have a good sized group attending today, and we'll place everybody in mute mode. We'll have a 10-minute Q&A session after the presentation, so I encourage you to submit any questions you may have in the chat window, and we'll reply during the Q&A. The SYSPRO security framework is multifaceted, not just your traditional user rights and passwords. So I look forward to Stefano providing some clarification over the various components. With no further delay, I turn it over to Stefano, who many of you know, to present how to manage the SYSPRO security and auditing features. Over to you, Steph.
Thanks, Rod. Good day, everyone. Welcome to our security and auditing training series. We'll be taking a look at various aspects of groups, roles, passwords, and auditing tools in SYSPRO. So let's get started and see what we're going to be looking at today. So on the agenda, we're always going to look at some operator and group-based security. We also will look at the role aspect of security and how it integrates into the operator and the program accesses. We'll also look at some program-based passwords and password options on how to set operator password rules, for example. And then we'll finally look at amendment journals, the auditing tools, and then specifically electronic signatures as well. One point I'd like to stress out in this presentation today is that I'll be using SYSPRO 8. You might see some features on the screen or in the screenshots I'll be providing in the PowerPoint presentation that you might not have, obviously, if you're still on SYSPRO 7. So I will not be explaining the majority of those today. Before we get started, I'd like to kind of look at the group-based and role-based security in SYSPRO. We do have the choice of either or. There's a way to blend both. Obviously, roles provide more than just security. It also controls the user interface, activities and fields, and electronic signatures, for example. Thus, today the focus will only be on how do we use roles for security-based program access. So on the group here, I've noted a couple of things on the groups as of pros compared to roles, and we're going to go through that. So one of the things we're traditionally used to is setting up security through groups in SYSPRO. We create 1, 2, or many groups and then define the program accesses within each group, and then we assign those to operators. Now, one of the things is between the groups and roles we'll see today is that we can create multiple groups. However, in roles, you're limited to that one single list of program accesses, so we'll go through that. So the pros of groups, we have the flexibility of creating one or many groups, as I was mentioning. So it allows for new functions and responsibilities quickly. So if you assign an operator within a group, a new function, we can create another subgroup and then assign it to that specific operator, even though he's in a department-based group or security role. You can only affect that specific operator, as I was just mentioning. We can use the layered approach to subgroups. So if you use multiple subgroups, you can have your main group, subgroups, all underneath one based by module or a detailed granular version of a module. If you use a naming convention within your groups that makes it clear, you can use, it's easy to distinguish. So if you, for example, in the purchase order module, if you would create multiple groups for that, you can name it for purchase order viewers, future purchase order operators, and purchase order administrators as an example. And I'll show you how I've done that as well. When obviously you are using just groups and not roles, you don't have to switch within these security accesses. It's all assigned to that operator. So when you do use this approach, obviously the security matrix is limitless. So you can create a multitude of security groups and assign them to whoever operators you'd like to have access to that. Now, one of the cons of that is obviously is more setup time, because you now have to realize if you create a multiple subgroups, you have to know what groups have access to what programs. So it can get confusing pretty quickly. You could also incur possible conflicts with other groups. So you'd have two subgroups with the same program accesses. The hierarchy might get complicated. So if you have the layered approach and you have multiple subgroups, you don't know which one has which program access. So you're always reviewing or revising your security group. So one of the things I was mentioning earlier is that naming conventions could be very important in this matrix setup. For the roles, so if we use roles strictly to control program access, it's a single security list. So that means changes or additions can be done quickly without conflicts, because we only have one list of program accesses for that role. All operators have the same access, so there's no trying to determine if you have a multitude of operators within a department to see do they have different accesses between each of them. No, they don't if they're using role-based security. It's the layered approach can still be done in terms of using multiple roles. So you can have the operator switch role if he needs to access, for example, the WIP module or inventory module programs. It requires less setup time, obviously, because you're not going through your multitude of subgroups. And there is no conflicts. So again, single list of program access list, and there's no conflicts in there. One of the drawbacks of that is obviously if you want different access or functions to give into that operator, I was mentioning you have to switch the role. So some of you already use that feature, and you know how sometimes depending on the frequency, switching roles throughout the day could be problematic for some. It's rigid, meaning you can't relax the security behind it. It's an all or nothing single program list of accesses. You can only have a maximum of 5 roles per operator as of right now. That's which makes the security matrix limited in a sense. Now, I listed those as cons, but in certain industries, those are benefits. So I just, from my perspective, in terms of the benefits and features of SYSPRO, I listed it as a con, but for some industries, it's a benefit. On the security settings for operators or roles, there's also fields called activities and fields. So one of the things we see that certainly is not defined always is activities, and activities basically allow either the operator or the role, if it's assigned to the role, it limits certain transactions within a program. So for example, here I laid out accounts payable invoice entry. Credit notes are not allowed. So if you do give access to an operator to the AP invoice posting program, they can post, credit, debit, and invoice notes. However, you can limit that function through activities. For fields, same thing is similar to activities. However, fields are more of give them to read-only access. So for example, you can give an operator access to a customer maintenance program, and they will not have access to the credit limit field. So let's take a look at that. For the groups, we will go under Setup, Groups, and here you have your listing of groups. So one of the things I was mentioning, if you're using a group-based approach, you can segregate them with a certain naming convention. For example, here I've created 3 different groups. One being the purchase order viewer, another operators, and other administrators. So this is where you can start using a layered approach. For example, give an operator just viewer and operator access, which means they'll have access to for reports and purchase order query. Whereas if we give them both groups, then they'll have all the reports and queries, plus the purchase order maintenance and printing options. And if we wanted to take it a step further, we could also include purchase order administrators. Now, if we expand this to all the modules you currently use, it could get quite extensive. However, it does give you that free, limitless approach in terms of you can customize the security basically to your imagination at this point. If we look at the operator setup that's assigned those groups, under Setup Operators. I have now assigned my LSI training operator, the main group, as purchase order viewers. And then as you can see here, the subgroups have been assigned as purchase order operators and administrators. So using this layered approach, you can get very customized security for your organization. However, as I was mentioning, the drawbacks is a lot of maintenance and work to do. On the activity, since I'm on the operator screen, here we usually have it set up when you create an operator set as default, but however, you always want to go through this if you use the activities set against the operator and you want to edit those activities. So here right now, my operator does not have access to any of these additional activities. Nothing is checked. So for example, earlier I was mentioning if we do give an operator access to the accounts payable supplier setup screen, well, we can now prevent them from deleting that supplier through this activity right here. So that can be set again at the operator level or at the role level. For the fields, we would list those fields. And here now you can now either allow or disallow certain fields. So earlier I was mentioning the accounts receivable credit limit. So even though the operator has access to customer maintenance, they can now no longer change the accounts receivable credit limit for that customer by simply checking it off. I'll go now to role maintenance in the role interface. So we go to administration role management and show you how the role-based security setup is defined. My apologies here. So I was mentioning earlier, the role does more than just program access. So just here we have the configuration for that role. At this time, this user role, the user interface is not controlled by the role. Neither are the e-signatures, and program accesses are not set. However, we can set that, say it is configured by role. And now you can go into the maintenance program by clicking the little loop icon. And then the program list would be displayed. From there, you can now assign which program accesses that role uses. So earlier I was mentioning, yes, it's clear, it's quick to set, and it's very clear as to what this role has access to. It does not give you that flexibility if you want to add an additional program to one single operator within that role. Activities and fields, those are the same fields we've seen on the operator setup. However, they are set at the role level as well. So this is an interesting part, as the tedious part of setting operators is we tend to copy them from a known operator that has the correct settings. However, instead of doing that, you can configure it by the role and set them here. Again, it's the same fields that are displayed. Now, this gives you consistent results for activities and fields on the role. However, if you do want to give an operator a different activity or allow a different activity within a group that's in the same role, obviously here you cannot do that because everyone would be affected. Next up is password definition. In the password setup of SYSPRO, by default, the password, the operator is not allowed to change the password, has not been configured, or if it is configured, you can assign specific rules and options here. So that is found under the company setup, system setup, password definition in the case of SYSPRO 8. However, the fields remain the same in 7. Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to setup options, and the company specific settings will load. So here we can elect to have the operator change their password, which is accessible through their toolbar in SYSPRO. I'll show you that once I exit this screen. You can now enforce that all operators or specific operators change their password, enforce the password expiry, and include expiry days and warning days. So if they are coming close to an expiry threshold, they'll get a warning to change it in time. Now, with that being said, you would possibly also activate the supervisor password. So the supervisor password is very useful in either testing roles or managing operator setups or accesses. And we would do that through here. So to activate the supervisor password, and this effectively allows you to log into SYSPRO as anyone in the operator list anyways, or even if a password is required in one of the prompts, you can actually override it with the supervisor password. It allows you to take control of that SYSPRO operator. You can also enable password rules, which is a good setting to put on. You would have to put in a minimum password length if you do require it. You can define that length, and you could also define the complexity or the rules behind that password using digits or uppercase, lowercase letters, and also verify the historical password use. So I know some of you like to use the same password over and over, and you can prevent that to make it a little bit more secure. Next up is program passwords. Some of you are already familiar with this as well. What this does is basically within a given program access or program list in SYSPRO, you can prevent certain actions or type of postings to be done in SYSPRO. And for example, in here on the screen, I have an inventory receipt. If anyone would try to go into inventory movements and select the receipt type transaction, well, then they would have to enter a password. So that is good for certain environments if you do allow receipts. However, only specific operators can be allowed to do that. So if the matrix blend does not give you the accesses or the restrictions that you require, there's always a way to password protect certain programs, and that you can do here. So within SYSPRO, you go to the passwords under setup, password definition. So here, my screenshots, inventory receipts, I would prevent that, and unless they don't have the password. Simply enter the password and save it. Now that concludes for the security aspect of setups. And let's take a look at some auditing tools. So the things I've dug out to show you as an example today are the operator audit report, which gives you basically visibility on what accesses and programs that the operator has. There's a new security settings dashboard in version 8 that I'll show you really quickly that you could look forward to. There's also the amendment journals we'll be looking at today, the system audit tool, and finally electronic signatures. So the operator audit report is under the administration folder within the SYSPRO main menu under security. And what this provides is a visibility of the accesses you have per operator. So once you do load that operator, you would select it, and then the following tabs would appear and the information would be filled in. So for the activities, SYSPRO will take a while to load this program because it has to go through all these various fields and all against all the operators and roles. And then once it finally populates the screen, you'll have all this information that you can now analyze on screen. So on the activities side, you see that this operator named Ellen in the accounts payable has access to all these fields. But clearly here under my configuration, it's telling me that the operator has access through this because it's been set to the operator level, and it's also been set at the role level as well. And in SYSPRO, the role takes precedence over the operator if it's set as such. When we saw earlier in the role configuration, the activities and fields set at the role level. In the program accesses, you would have a list of programs. It would load up all the programs that this operator would have access to. And you could go through the entire list. The program link will have hyperlinked on the program code, and you can click on that, and SYSPRO will give you additional information and give you the list of all the operators that have access to that specific program. In version 8, we have this new security settings dashboard. It's kind of unpivoted from the other direction. So when it loads up your companies that you have installed in SYSPRO. And then from there, you can go in through each company and go through the entire list of programs, activities, fields, so on and so forth. And when you do that, if you select one of the nodes and programs here, you now see who has access to specific programs. So for my program list, I'll click on accounts payable period end. And below in the groups tab, I now see all the groups that have access to that, and also the operators assigned to that group. So it kind of gives you a little bit of better view if you're trying to figure out who has access to specific programs by groups, roles, and then just singly operators here. The amendment journals in SYSPRO. We do have, these have been in and around SYSPRO for quite some time now. I like to point them out because not everyone uses them or set correctly, and one of the reasons is such as that new features are introduced in SYSPRO from time to time. And one of those examples would be the WIP amendment journal that came out in mid-life cycle of SYSPRO 7 and might have not been configured or turned on. So that's a good thing to go and take a look at how you make sure they're turned on, and at least the SYSPRO is logging them. We can show you that now. In the setup for each module in SYSPRO, you have an amendment journal preference. So you could go through every single module and make sure they're turned on. Accounts payable preferences, yes, including additions. Accounts receivable preferences, yes, including additions. For those of you that have probably not turned on the work in progress amendment journal, you could do that through the work in progress preferences. And in here, look for amendment journals, captured amendment journals, to make sure to turn that on. Now, if you noticed, as soon as I clicked on my preferences, I pressed Control F to do a search. Sometimes these screens can get a little cluttered or just basically overflowing with lots of information, a lot of features to turn on or off. You can use a fine caption program to highlight the option that you're looking for. So what are the benefits of amendment journals? We keep tracks of key fields. So for example, customers, suppliers, stock codes, bill of materials, work in progress changes or additions. And I can show you that example, for example, on a job. I'll open up the WIP amendment journal. And you can include all these options and filter for a specific job. Now, SYSPRO will read the amendment file and report on any changes or additions based on your selection criteria. So increase my report here. So here I've decided to filter on a single job. As you can see here now, all the changes have been tracked and logged into the job amendment journal. So I can now see who is changing, which allocation, and what has changed. So you'll have the date of the change, the job, the operator or operation stock code. In the case of here, it's a stock code change, the line and who did that. The material allocation, in this case, unit quantity required was changed from 1 to 2. Now you see you have multiple fields have been changed. The non-conforming flag has been turned on for that line. Here is another change, so a labor allocation planned end date have been changed. So my delivery dates have been changed as well on this job. It clearly shows what changes have occurred on this job. Another tool is the system audit log, a very interesting program. Gives you more visibility on the more administrative aspects of SYSPRO. I pulled out some category filters out just to show you some examples. But SYSPRO currently has over 100 categories listed in the system audit that you can take a look at and review. I pulled out some interesting ones here, as you can see on the chart on the left. So, for example, access denied to a specific company if someone is trying to log into a specific company. If custom forms are deleted or renamed, that's a good, interesting one too as well. These are all administrative tasks. Custom form table deleted. So if you want to know if somebody starts deleting all the custom form fields for a given custom table, and when there's no more custom columns, SYSPRO just deletes the table. If there's a group that's been added, changed, or deleted, if someone purged the job logging. One of the more interesting ones is the login attempted for the licenses. If you set this correctly, you can have SYSPRO log according to your settings and make an informed decision on the license count. We often get how many licenses should I purchase? Should I get 1? Should I get 2? Should I get 4? We don't know. Well, according to this log, if you set it up correctly, you can make an informed decisions and determine, do we actually need an additional operator license, or we're just hitting the limit every so often, and determine that from there. And that is found again in the SYSPRO administration. There, I believe, security system audit query. So by default, it opens up on today's date. And this, please ignore my demo data. It's been changed to the future time. But it basically grabs everything from today onwards. As you can see here, I have some multiple changes. If I look at my categories, I was mentioning over 100 categories in here. There's quite a few. I'd invite you to go through this and look at what you are currently have in your system audit. We have some interesting settings if you were inquiring about certain activities in SYSPRO. And electronic signatures. I like to spend some time on electronic signatures as an auditing tool, but it does more than just auditing. And I'll spend a couple of minutes on that. And so what does electronic signatures do? Well, for the most part, it does log transactional operations at the, at the basic access level, and can even configure electronic signatures at the detail level. One way or multiple ways of configuring a lot of electronic signatures is through the company level, which is usually recommended, obviously, but there might be some instances where you want to only configure electronic signatures at the role level or at the operator level. There might be some instances where you do want to configure it at the role level, and I'll probably give you examples of that afterwards. And one of the reasons you don't want to turn this on company-wide sometimes is, for example, you don't need to have every specific program logged in SYSPRO. Now, there is a little performance hit when you do turn on electronic signatures, especially if you turn logging on for every single program. So that SYSPRO will incur a little bit of performance anxiety there. That is obviously not recommended to turn logging on to every single program and module, but more selectively turn on what you need. And traditionally or historically, I've seen it work very well when only certain transactions are turned on. However, it does incur performance anxiety when they are all turned on. I don't think there is a requirement as of yet. I have not seen a requirement as of yet to have these turned on completely across the entire suite. So one of the benefits, or multiple benefits, obviously, I was mentioning, as an auditing tool, you have electronic signatures, log transactional operations at the detail level, including the before and after values of certain fields. You can use custom validation suited for the business needs and prevent transactions from posting. One example of that would be for on a purchase order receipt. So we have operators doing receipts, and in the scenario where we do partial receipts, SYSPRO does ask the operator, is this line now complete? And some operators mistakenly click yes. And then what happens is that PO is no longer outstanding. So we can set up a rule for that and use custom validation. Let's take a look at that right now. So under the setup, go to electronic signatures. And in my case, I'll use the company EDU1 and look for the purchase order. Again, I can filter this list by the module name, or I can also filter by transaction ID. In this case, I don't know it off by heart, but I will look for purchase order receipt. Now you have a conditional control here. And then we'll open that up, clicking configure. Now my first transaction right now is set to log only. That's the system default. If I turn it on, it will say log only, purchase order receipt. Now I have turned logging on. And one of the things is when you do turn logging on, you have to make sure if you do require a detailed log, you need to activate that and click on configure details. When you do that, you have all the available fields, or most of the available fields, in the job logging of electronic signatures. So you can select all and do OK. Now I was mentioning that conditional transaction. In this case, I'm trying to prevent the line from being completed. So I would add a new transaction and call a new condition, give it a name. And once you do that, you can now define that condition. In this case, I want to prevent line completed, access is denied from that transaction. And the condition would be if the outstanding quantity after the receipt is greater than 0 and the line complete flag is set to yes, then deny that transaction. So this is currently actually a working example from one of our sites that does prevent the operators from hitting the line as complete. So we use electronic signatures for that purpose. And once that occurs, then obviously the operator gets a message box on the screen, the transaction has been denied. And you'll get on the error message the transaction ID and the transaction number or name that occurred during that transaction. Also, there's in the conditional logic, I haven't shown you that yet, but there are custom fields available. So if you are working in this example, I'm working with purchase orders. If I go back to my conditional rule, click on define. If I browse my list of fields, here are the electronic signature captured fields. However, if I scroll down a little lower, I'll start now seeing my master table or detail table for that specific module. And in this case, it's purchase order detail. But if I continue towards the bottom, I will have my custom fields available. So if you do have a rule set on a custom field, you can now include that in your conditional logic. You also have that available for the purchase order header if you scroll down a little bit more. And it should be the fields toward the end. So anything with a plus symbol indicate your custom fields. So you can get pretty creative or very specific on how you want to try and create these conditions. In this case, I also have an inventory master custom fields as well. Another benefit of using electronic signatures, as mentioned earlier, not just an auditing tool or security tool, but we could also trigger actions or messages calling the extensive library of E.NET Business Objects or SQL. I have a few examples of that. And one that's currently in place is we use at the stock code creation, we do trigger an action after the creation of the stock code is to immediately put the stock code on hold. So we're effectively using electronic signatures as a workflow tool or a very basic workflow tool. So the creation of a stock code must be reviewed by someone so no one can purchase or sell it until someone has reviewed the stock code. You could do the same, for example, for adding customers and suppliers. So if someone needs to create a supplier, you have them enter all the detailed information and then put the supplier on hold. No one can use it until the operator or the administrator has access to release the supplier from hold, review the actual supplier field. This is pretty, you can also call, if you're comfortable with SQL VB scripting, or even custom third-party applications, you can actually trigger these programs within electronic signatures. And the nice thing is when you do that in conjunction with the logging feature, when you go back to your log, you will see these two transactions logged. So you'll know if the triggerer has fired or not. Once the information is logged, you can go to electronic signature query. And this is where I was going to show you the difference between detailed level logging and simply turned logging on. You can see here on the screen, I have electronic signatures audit log on all transactions. And in my specific case, I have the AR customer has been changed. And you can see there's various changes logged here. However, it just gives me the operator that did it at the time and the customer under item key, but it doesn't tell me what has changed. And that was done specifically to show you this in this example, is that if you don't have detailed logging turned on, then you will not see that change. Here below, I turned on detailed logging and made a change, and now I can now see more of the specific changes against that customer code. Again, these electronic signatures is found under the administration folder, under electronic signatures. So go to administration, electronic signatures query. Now today I've noticed earlier, I've showed you the WIP amendment journal. I noticed that I made changes to that job 600. And I have it logged in electronic signatures. However, I don't know what occurred. There's a perfect example, is the logging has been turned on, but I don't know what occurred. However, the WIP amendment journal did show me what occurred. However, if I could have turned on detailed logging on this transaction, I would see part of that information in here. So if I go to yesterday's transactions, or past week, apologies. You now see that information here on screen. So I see a transaction was done on May 5th at 12:47, and here are all the details of that transaction. So it can get pretty extensive in here. One of the nice things as well as electronic signature audit is you can filter by these transactions. So if you have logging turned on for multiple electronic signature points, you can basically filter them through here. SYSPRO wants the transaction number. However, you can browse for it, obviously, if you don't know what the transaction number is. See here, you have the transaction code, which we saw earlier in the electronic signature list, and you also have the name. You can look at easily for which transaction you'd like to filter on. If you want to filter for a specific date, you can do that here. Transaction time, or a given operator as well. So you could do single list range for a specific program, for example. So again, we were looking at earlier who has access to which programs, and if you are logging it, well, you can see how many times that given operator or group of operators is using this program, for example. Status selection, so here we can filter on statuses. And here we have authorized and completed successfully, but based on our rules or conditions or how we set our electronic signatures, you can look at all the denied transactions. For example, see how many times operators are trying to complete a purchase order line on a partial receipt. You can see that there. You could also filter on those key fields. So if it's a purchase order, you would filter on the purchase order number here. So that would, the start key would be the purchase order number. In the case if it's a purchase order detail line that you're trying to log, the key would include the purchase order and the purchase order line. You're not obligated to put it in, but if you do want to see all changes to a given line, you would have to put it in. But you could also filter it on screen here using the filter text as well. And lastly is the variable selection. So on the variable selection here, we can basically filter on these columns. So in this case, operator location, Dunning email address, delivery terms. Now, the majority of these fields, one of the things that's not apparent on the screen is that the variable filter must include, at this time in SYSPRO 8, must include the percent sign. You have to put the percent plus the field or variable name. Well, so that basically for electronic signatures, it's a powerful tool that is made available in your version of SYSPRO. Everyone that has SYSPRO has access to electronic signatures module. Some people do not use it. Some people do use it. It's been configured briefly. However, as you can see, there's some examples where you can definitely customize your SYSPRO application or use it as a greater auditing tool for visibility on certain transactions. I'd recommend exploring that e-signatures to benefit your needs. Now, let's go back a bit on security. One of the things I didn't discuss is obviously the roles and groups in terms of how to, what would be the best benefit out of two worlds? Well, one of the things I tend to look at is in a role, you can create a role and use that to say user interface is not configured by the role. So that would not change the environment for your current operators. And program access would not be configured by the role. However, the activities and fields would be configured by the role. And that benefit basically is the flexibility of what I was mentioning earlier, is that you can use the multi-layered approach. Obviously, if you have a good naming convention, that will give you that flexibility to give the operators with the accesses they need in SYSPRO, and giving you that flexibility without creating a slew of roles to assign to different operators, and also have the operators switch roles whenever they require different accesses in their system. So you could probably explore that in the test company if you do have a test company set up. And then turn on roles for a test operator and experiment with it. If you do require that flexibility, if not, you can experiment with roles and only use program access within roles. Both are being used in all the sites we have right now currently. And there's benefits to both and there's drawbacks to both. It really depends on the requirements of each customer that doesn't need that different set of security controls. Earlier I was mentioning where the password can be changed for a given operator. So if they go onto the setup passwords, change my password, they can do that through here. And it's possibly one of the things I probably didn't explain as to why would we want password complexity. And that is when we do log on to SYSPRO, some sites do have the operator field that is available to be overwritten in. So that means I can technically try everyone's password. So I can guess someone's username, enter that username, and then try a password, for example, if it's even set. So you probably want to, if you do allow that, you probably do want to set password rules and password complexity so that people don't try to enter as other operators within SYSPRO. So that's one way you can prevent that through password definition and password rules. Another auditing tool that I do have, I did not show you, is the job logging. We're all possibly familiar with the job logging in SYSPRO. And that's an additional tool that basically gives us access to viewing all the programs that have been opened in SYSPRO, what has occurred in SYSPRO, who has been logging into SYSPRO. It doesn't give you the granular approach in the system auditing, but it does give you a list of all the transactions. By default, it'll open onto today's date, and you have the list of accesses based on your sorting sequence here. And you do have, as you can see here, I've been going into these various programs, and now they are logged. If you do want to see the details, you click on details. That takes a little bit of time to load up, depending on how many records I have on the screen. If I don't have very many, it's relatively quick. And if I do have a lot, it'll take some time. SYSPRO needs to go through the detailed amendment for the job logging and display all this information. One of the benefits is the job logging is that you do get to see the logins, and also if there's any issues with the login, so that gets logged through here as well. You will also see all the e.net calls as well. So if the e.net has been called within SYSPRO, you would now see that through here, and you can determine the log on and log off date, and as well as the runtime. So given that I've been in the inventory movements program on this specific line for 12 seconds, I might have been doing something for that amount of time. If I do look at supplier query, well, I've had it open for 16 minutes and 23 seconds on that given date. That basically concludes what I would like to show you today. I think we do have some questions.
That's terrific. That's terrific, Seth. Let me feed those to you. So
sure.
We'll start with, is there a way to export the current groups/user security to roles?
That's a good question. Actually, I do not know how to export and re-import through roles. I know you can import and export roles and role configurations, but from groups to roles, I'm not aware of that feature. I can get back to you. Do we have that person that asked the question?
Yep.
Perfect. We'll get back to you on that.
Okay. And is there a way to export a current user layout to a new role?
So when we say the layout, the user interface, so if the
Correct.
The user interface is controlled by role, you can export roles and re-import them.
But can you take an existing user, say either you do not have roles in place and you're about to start roles and you want to start off of a particular user, can you do that?
Yes, you don't have to assign roles to everyone. So if I go to the operator list, I'll use my little toolbar shortcut here.
But I believe the question is, I've got 10 users. I want to use one of those users, all of their UI, I want to use to become a role.
Oh, so taking what they currently have. The good thing about roles is that once you do have, for example, your screens configured and you go into role design, it should technically take on what you currently have on that screen. However, once you do have it set, you must go and configure it through the role. So there's no transferring of screens per se into a given role. Is you have to copy the role, or you go into role maintenance and design it the way you need to have it.
Okay, we can follow up. Those both came from the same individual. We can follow up.
Sure.
Another question, is there an easy way to transport security amendments from a test or QA environment to a prod environment? If we create a new role with various security profile and test it, can we move it to prod as a package?
The short answer is yes. So I was mentioning that you can export the roles. Sorry, I'm not in the right interface. So that would be in administration, customization, management. So if you do start a new role, so I'll get the one I was using for my example. Sorry, scroll wheel's a little quick here. So right now I don't have any information in this one, but if I did have logistical manager or loader, sorry, I don't know all these roles by heart. If there was some customization defined, yes, you can export those roles. So as you can see here in the export utility, you can say, I want to export the role, select the role you want to export. If there is any keyword exclusions for assigned to that role, include operators or groups that are defined or assign those roles and then re-import them. And you can now import them in the live environment using this utility.
Okay, on to the next one. Considering an operator that has access to more than one company, is there a way to enforce a different default role for each company this user logs in? Example, when the user logs in company A, the default role is role 1. When the same user logs into company B, SYSPRO defaults to role 2.
Well, there's a setup for the customization. I am not too familiar with the company cross roles yet. There is a way to do it, and I don't remember if that feature is included in 7 or they've newly introduced it in 8. I can get back to that question. I don't have the information at hand right now.
Okay,
As to how
we'll
to do
follow up on that. I want to add a few others. Is there any setup to be done for the system audit to work?
For the system audit, no.
Okay.
No, it's turned on.
In eSIGs, can you explained that you can do the eSIGs at the company or role or operator level. Can you create a conflict? Do you have to pay attention that you could create a conflict by setting a particular action on the company level and perhaps a different one on the role and or operator level? Or
You could. However, there's only one eSIG configuration file that's going to invoke, if you want to call it that. So it won't invoke both.
Okay. Also related to that, in the role activities and fields, if you gave certain activity or field access at a user level and a role level, did you say that those can never conflict because the role will take priority?
Yes, exactly. So earlier I was showing that screen in the operator audit, and on the activities we saw a duplicate of each program, and that's because I set them to the operator level and to the role level. However, the role level does take precedence over the operator, so the operator settings are ignored.
Okay. Could you go back to the eSIG setup, and on the screen where you grant either access or deny or log, there's also the exclude from definition. Could you explain what that's all about or what it's used for?
I think that's a feature that I have not explored yet, so I don't have the answer to that right now.
Okay, sorry to catch you off guard on that one.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay. Oh, and so the amendment journals will show both before and after in terms of a change.
Yeah.
The eSIGs shows what happened in that transaction. So if I want to find, what would I do within the eSIGs to find out what I replaced, what the previous data was?
Yeah, I might have not made that clear. So the amendment journals should always be used. It gives you more of a better visibility in terms of key field changes. So if you change a customer, supplier, or a stock code, that does some very good auditing. eSIGs, the approach of eSIGs I would use it more for transactional based logging. So I could see here on my screen, I have accounts payable supplier added. I would not use eSIG to log that. I rely on my amendment journal for that. And just the reason for that is if I go into detailed logging, so if I say a log only, not every single field will be available in here. Now we could obviously ask SYSPRO to add them, but I don't believe every single field is available. So the amendment journal will give you more details on the key fields.
Well, we're almost at the hour. I don't have any further questions. So in closing, Steph, excellent presentation.
Thank you,
I
everyone.
trust everyone has gained a better understanding of the SYSPRO security framework and how you can apply it to your own business control requirements. I remind you there will be weekly sessions in English on Thursday, French on Tuesdays. Also, if you have any comments or feedback, I encourage you to send me an email. My email is mentioned in your registration confirmation. So good day, everyone, and stay safe and healthy. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you. Bye.